Good morning, fourth grade Eagles. Today we are going to be using what we know about angles and benchmark angles that you used yesterday from Miss Birch's lesson to start measuring with a really cool tool. So I want to introduce you to this fun little tool called the Protractor. This Protractor, you'll notice, has a large 90 on it. It also has some other numbers with 3 digits, and it has 2-digit numbers underneath. Notice the pattern changes. We use this protractor to measure angles, and I'm going to get to show you how. But before I do, I want us to have a quick refresher about those benchmark angles Ms. Birch talked about yesterday. Remember, we have the 45-degree angle, which is an acute angle. It looks something like this. We have the 90-degree angle, which made that perfect L shape like the corner of a sheet of paper. And we had our 180-degree angle, which was a straight line. We're going to talk today about how we would go ahead and measure those angles using a protractor, and how we are going to use the protractor to read for numbers and how we'll draw with it. So I want us to talk about my first angle right here. You'll notice this angle, it looks like an L, which in our head we know means it's usually a right angle, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't see a little square in the corner, I just see the angle. So what Miss Wackus is gonna do is I'm gonna take my handy dandy protractor, and I notice that the angle is on my right side. It's not on my left, it's on my right, which means I'm gonna use the right side of my protractor. And I'm gonna line up, there's a tiny little circle right here that I'm gonna line up with the corner. I'm gonna make it as straight as possible going across. And if I look, I'm gonna see that my line is going across, and I read this top line to see what angle it lands on. And if I follow it up, oh, I can see it lands at the 90. So it is a 90-degree angle, which means I can put my little square there. It is 90 degrees, which means it is a right angle. Notice I used that protractor. I lined up the circle to the corner. I made sure it was perfectly straight. And then I read the number at the top. What I can do, looking at my next angle, is I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to line up that circle right at the vertex. I'm going to make it perfectly straight. But I noticed something. I'm going to look at that top line because that top line tells me how to read my angle. Okay, and I'm going to follow that line up, and it falls right in here. And I'm going to look, because since the angle opens on the right, and I know this is an acute angle, I know that the angle is going to measure less than 90 degrees. It's going to be smaller than 90 degrees because it's so cute. Remember, it's an acute angle. So am I going to use the numbers that are larger than 90 degrees, or am I going to use the numbers that are smaller than 90 degrees? I'm going to use the numbers that are less than 90 degrees or smaller, because I know this is an acute angle, and to measure it that large wouldn't make sense. So I'm going to go ahead and read, and I see it falls between 40 and 50. So now I'm going to use these tiny little lines. You see them? And I'm going to count them. So I have 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. So this would be a 45-degree angle. I'm going to make my little angle mark and write it in. It is 45 degrees, which means it is an acute angle, right? Huh. Interesting. And I bet you that if I measured another 45-degree angle, right there. Oops, didn't make my line straight. Oh, what would that make? It would make a 90-degree angle. Why? Because 45 plus 45 is 90. Interesting little fact, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. But now I want to look at this angle. This again looks like an L, only this time it's pointing to the left. Notice my angle is on this side versus on this side. So I'm gonna have to use my brain and think about, am I gonna use the left side of my protractor or the right side of my protractor? And in this case, because the angle opens to the left, I'm gonna use the left side of my protractor. We always go in the way that the angle opens up. So I'm gonna line it up, and what does it land on, boys and girls? You're right, it lands on 90 degrees, which means this is what type of angle? It is a right angle. It is just opened to the other side. Notice I'm using this protractor to line up the corner, making it perfectly straight, and reading my top line where it lands. If I were to continue this, I'm gonna pull up my other sheet of paper, I'm gonna have an angle that looks like this, and I want us to think back to those benchmark angles. Ms. Birch told us that a straight line is a benchmark angle, and it's known as a 180 degree angle. But I've got to double check that this is 180 degrees and not 179. So I'm gonna line up that line, and I'm gonna notice something. It doesn't really have a side to read. So what I notice is it lands on this dot, and it lands on this dot. So I can choose how I want to read it. Ms. Watkins is going to read it like this, like it's going in this direction, okay? But if I do that, I'm going to notice this is 170. We see that? This line's 170. So if I start out at 0 and I go all the way to 170, but I have all these lines, and this lands on something, it's just not labeled. So it says 170, 171, 172, 173, 174, 175, 176, 177, 178, 179, 180. So this is a 180 degree angle, which means it is a straight angle or a straight line, right? Notice you could have read that either way because the way of the angle is opened. I do know it's going to be an obtuse angle because it's bigger. The angle itself is larger than 90 degrees, and I could read it in either direction, giving me that 180. Oh, I have another acute angle, but this time, is it open to the left or the right? It is open to the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to line up that protractor on my vertices. I'm going to make sure it's on my 0. And I want us to look. Oh, because it opens on the left and it is an acute angle, I know it is smaller or less than 90 degrees. So my numbers I'm going to look at are on the top up here. I'm not going to look at these larger numbers because that wouldn't make sense with an acute angle. It's not reasonable. So I see it falls between the 40 and 50, and it falls in that middle line, which I know is going to be 41, 2, 3, 4, 5, 45 degrees. And it is another benchmark angle because it is an acute. Now, let's say, for instance, I see a picture that looks like this. And a lot of the questions you're going to get on your protractor questions, oh, I just drew another 45 degree angle. No, Miss Watkins, that didn't work out the way I wanted it to. A lot of the questions you're going to get on your, when it comes to a protractor, is going to have a picture of an angle with the protractor on top. So notice, here's my angle, right? And I'm going to read this top line. It's less than 90 degrees. It doesn't make that perfect angle, so it's an acute angle. So I'm going to go ahead and line up the corner, look at it, and say, okay, it's between 60 and 70, and it's at 61, 2, 3, 4, 5. 65 degrees. You'll see that? It's at that 65. It's at that middle between 60 and 70. Ooh. Focus, little guy. There we go. So it would be 65 degrees. I might see an angle that looks like this. Again, I'm going to line up that corner with my dot in the middle, right? See, it's lined up. Now this one is an obtuse angle, so it's going to be greater than 90 degrees. So I'm going to read the lower numbers, the less than 90, or the higher than, or greater than 90. I'm going to read the greater than because the angle opens up, so I'm going to go in this direction, counting up. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120. Where does that line land? It lands right at 130 degrees, meaning it is an obtuse angle. This one was acute. And that's how we use our protractor. We look at the protractor and line up, remember, the hole with the vertice. We see which way the angle opens and we count in that direction. Okay? And then we read the number it lands on. Sometimes we have to count those hash marks or those little lines in between. But we're going to use those as images on our work today. On your quizzes and your drawings, make sure you hit submit. And I hope you have a fantastic day. If you have any questions, feel free to message me on Edsby. Thank you.